Good morning, friends. Um, we made it to Friday, so let's celebrate that first of all. We are starting now a weekly set of webinars because we expect that things at the federal level will start to move fast, and we want to let you know what's going on and provide as many real-time examples of action steps and things that you can do as the days go by. So when you receive an email from us to register for a weekly webinar, it will be like this. We will provide you the latest information that we know and then give you some examples of things that people across the state are already doing that maybe you will be inspired to do yourselves, as well as thinking about what we think strategies could be for as the weeks go on. This is one of those situations where things can move very fast, yet you have to be engaged for a long period of time. So from now until, there is a bill that is signed into law, it's important for us to keep watching and keep acting and keep responding, because it's not over until it's over. Real quickly, this is a slide with a lot of information on it. There are many ways that Medicaid can be cut, and it kind of doesn't matter as much for you to know exactly each, strategy that Congress could use. The important thing to know is that the Medicaid cut ideas that we have been talking about since the beginning of January, it's all the same menu of ideas. And so no matter which way those ideas get included or advanced, it is the same set of ideas that is looking to reduce the amount of federal Medicaid spending and put states in a position where they have to essentially cut Medicaid programs. We are seeing more and more traffic in the last couple of days. Beth, you have your hand up. Oh, no, she has her hand up. She did not mean to. We are seeing traffic in the last couple of days that indicates that both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate are ready to do the first step in their budget reconciliation bill. So next week, potentially Tuesday or Wednesday, some articles have the House actually publicizing something today. We will see what is called a budget blueprint, or the first step, which doesn't tell you what cuts are, but does tell you the amount of money that Congress is wanting to cut, essentially. So all of the work that you have been doing thus far has really mattered because we were supposed to be in this position 2 weeks ago. And we have essentially bought ourselves some time here, which is really valuable. But now I think we should, that if those budget resolutions next week are introduced, that we will have kind of a faster pace of movement at Congress. They will need to actually figure out what exactly the cuts are and put it into legislative language, and then start advancing through a legislative process to pass a bill that can be signed by the president. We are also learning there was some questioning of Medicaid cuts by some members in the House, and it seems like we are now moving back to being more accepting of larger cuts. This is something that happens a lot, where people like you are saying what is true, and members of Congress hear it, and then they start questioning, and then they start kind of trying to get back to the position they were in before. So it is very important that we continue to engage and to continue to make the case of why Medicaid is so important, not only to people with disabilities, but the economy of the state and many other folks who either get paid with Medicaid dollars to provide health and long-term care services, or who rely on those services to stay healthy and stay out of more expensive institutions. We also, this morning, there was an article that talked about the president's desire to extend tax cuts. And we keep saying that there's the plans that they have want to remove, to do 5 trillion with a T in federal spending cuts. Apparently that may be the low end of the estimate. And so some of the ideas that Congress wants to pass that are in alignment with what the president wants to do may actually cost between $5 trillion and $11 trillion, which is a big difference. All right, so little pep talk. The time that we were supposed to be in this position 2 weeks ago. So everything that you have done that has caused members of Congress to change a position, to question whether these cuts are a good idea, to slow things down, all of that is a victory. Time is the most precious commodity here. When you get more time, that means that you can connect with more people and make sure that they know about what's going on and welcome them into being involved, right? There is more time for all of us to continue to educate lawmakers about what Medicaid cuts could mean for the people who live in their districts and for the people who work in their districts. There's also a lot of time for us to start asking tough questions to lawmakers. What is their position on certain kinds of Medicaid cuts? We can know what those responses are. We can respond to those responses. And the more interaction that we have with lawmakers, the more we learn about what they're thinking and what they may be willing or not willing to do. And the more we learn about what they are willing to commit or not commit to do. I do think we're in a moment where there is not complete agreement among lawmakers about whether or how much to cut Medicaid, or what specific ideas they are comfortable with or not comfortable with. I think the last 2 weeks has been important to make sure that there isn't just agreement to do all of the menu of ideas that we've been talking about. However, now we're in a position where we kind of need to keep saying those things because everything that's been proposed in that menu of ideas is a Medicaid cut, and it will impact people who rely on Medicaid for health and long-term care or who are paid by Medicaid. The other really important thing that time has brought us here, we are watching, and a lot of people are watching, and they know it. And that means that we have to keep watching at this point. That's always been a really important part of any piece of large legislation, is that when legislators know that there are people who know what's happening and who are watching it and who are reacting and responding and engaged, it gives them pause, and those pauses are really, really important. So let's use our time well. Many of you have made calls and emails and set up in-district meetings. You've maybe been at a listening session. It's really important to be present, to take up space, and to continue doing it, because you folks know stuff. We've gotten a lot of responses that people have sent us, or things that they have learned about what their lawmakers have said. And many, many of you have said that you are surprised that your lawmakers do not know more about Medicaid. They don't necessarily know who it serves. They don't know what the Medicaid is used for. They may not know how it impacts people with disabilities or older adults or children. And they certainly don't know how many people are paid with Medicaid dollars, much less what it would mean if many of those dollars no longer came into their districts. Some people have reported that their lawmakers do not understand the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, which are two totally separate programs and do not do the same thing. So it's been really important that you understand you are an educative force for lawmakers. They do not know these programs and what they mean better than you do. You know what Medicaid does for you in your community and in your life, and you're providing a really valuable service for them every time you tell them what is real as opposed to what they have been told to believe. Every time you take up space, you are also taking up time, and it's important for you to keep taking up time. When a lawmaker receives a contact for a constituent, they really do have to figure out how to respond to that. And when they get many, many contacts from lots of constituents about the same topic, it really forces the lawmaker to think through how they want to respond to all of those people. Okay, when you show up at a listening session, when you show up at an in-district office, or when you have a meeting, this is all taking up staff time, and all of that time is being spent on talking about Medicaid, which should give legislators a really strong signal that this is an important issue because so many people are willing to spend time on it, and they have to spend time responding to that issue, okay? We also have, now that we've had many people who have contacted lawmakers, some of them are getting responses back from those lawmakers. And some of those responses include information that may be factually incorrect, say using the word Medicare when actually you were talking about Medicaid, for example. Sometimes we've heard people have responses that are trying to tell them about unrelated things that they've done in the past on different bills that are not related to Medicaid and were from, a couple of years ago. We've heard people say that they have heard, well, we aren't going to cut Medicaid, but we will do work requirements, which is on the list of Medicaid cuts. And there's an estimate that it would save the federal government $120 billion if they did that cut. So work requirements are a Medicaid cut. We've also seen letters that say things like we have got your message, but then don't tell you what they're going to do about it. There's no promise to do anything specific. So when you get those responses, do not take it as the end of a communication. Take it as the next phase of that communication. Every time you get a letter or a response back, it's an opportunity for you to communicate back. You can ask for things. You can, ask for an in-district meeting. If you've had an in-district meeting, you can ask for another one. You can bring different people to it. You can attend a listening session and bring different people to that. You can ask them their position specifically on different ideas. You can ask them for draft language. Sometimes a letter might say, well, I don't know what the details are yet, so I can't give you a position. Don't accept that. This menu of ideas has been out there for months. It has been published in major media organizations for months. there is a list of things that the congressional committees are considering as ways to cut funding. If they don't know what those things are, that seems unlikely to me. And it also seems unlikely that they might not have an idea of how they would make those cuts. So you don't have to accept that I don't know what the details are. You know enough to know what the cuts are. And you can ask them about, when are you going to get draft language, or I would like to see draft language, or I'd like you to engage with your colleagues on the budget committee and respond back to me with what specifically they are thinking about cutting. You can also say specifically, what are you going to do? What are you, lawmaker, doing to prevent these types of cuts from happening? I think that's important, because sometimes there are some members who will say, yes, we agree with you, but then it's really unclear what they're doing to make sure they're representing and really advocating on the behalf of their constituents who are concerned on that issue. Because every lawmaker has the ability to do something, just like every one of you has been doing lots of things all the way through here. You also can be part of holding lawmakers accountable when they're saying things that you don't think sound right. It is important for them to hear from constituents that message that did not fly, that people do not believe the message that they have sent. And there's certainly been incorrect statements or things that have been said that there really aren't any, there's never a citation or proof, okay? There's also starting to be some coverage of Medicaid cuts in the local press. Sometimes when you go to a listening session, there will be local reporters there or local state lawmakers, and oftentimes there will be an article that comes out after the fact summarizing what people have said. It's another great reason why you could going to a listening session and really making sure there are lots of people talking about Medicaid cuts and asking hard questions is good, because other people are there, including the press, and you might get an article out of it. And if you weren't there, but you see the article and you see a statement in the press that sounds strange, there's a reporter that you can follow up with. There's another person besides the lawmaker that you can talk to about Medicaid cuts. So what can we do this week? I saw a few people have been trying to do 5 things a day, and then kind of building a community around saying what they've been doing and seeing that other people are doing things. And I think that's really a great thing to do in this time. Try and do 5 things a day. They don't have to be big things. Maybe it's one call. Maybe it's sharing an article. Maybe it's reaching out to somebody in your life who might not know about this, or inviting them to something that you're doing, come along with me. All of those things, they may sound little, but they really add up and they all matter. And you can see that they all matter because all of you have been doing a lot of those little things over the past month. And it has slowed this down. It's, I think, important to publicly kind of show what you're doing and why, because you are the faces of what Medicaid cuts would mean. You are people who would be directly impacted. And I think that one way to kind of, in this age where nobody's getting information from necessarily the same place, it can be hard for people to know what is happening. And the more real people are posting what they're doing and why, it becomes easier for a greater group of people in the country to understand that something is happening that is that people are concerned about. So if you've sent messages to your lawmakers, or if you're going to call again this week, here are 6 things that you can ask them. First of all, having a hard decision on, are you for or against Medicaid cuts? That's a very blunt question, but I think it's an important one to ask. The next 4 questions are really asking a lawmaker to take a specific question and a position on what we know the Medicaid cut ideas are. And I've picked out 4 of them. There are other ideas, but I think these are really big ones that help you get a sense of where your legislator is. So you can ask them, where are you? What is your position on changing Medicaid into a block grant or a per capita cap? And how they respond will tell you a lot of information, and it may help you respond the next time with more information. The 6th one here, last week, some of you may be aware that the US Treasury stopped sending out money for lots of different things, and Medicaid was included in that. There was about 12 hours where reimbursements that had been submitted to the federal government, the money wasn't coming back to states. And I think for a lot of people, that was a real lesson that regardless of what Congress does or doesn't, if there's a willingness to turn off the funds coming into states, that has an immediate impact, and we know what that impact is. So I think it is important to know how your members think about letting the executive branch decide whether or not to pay people based on money that has already been spent. There's already been a decision Congress has made to spend money. And is it okay for somebody to say no to that decision after the fact and cut off money? So if many of you are going to be responding another time, here's some thoughts about how you might continue the conversation. We're going to enter a time now where there probably will be new information that is coming out, and so there will be more ability for you to engage with legislators. The more that becomes public, the more there you can respond to. I think there's also a need for folks to kind of be physically more present. You can, if you've attended an event or a meeting, this is a great time to send a follow-up written note that kind of restates everything you said at the meeting, and you can say, hey, I met you at the listening session. We talked about this, and just to make sure that your comments have been received in writing. We kind of talked about this in a previous slide. So I think these are some strategies that you can use as you follow up with lawmakers. What are some things that you might need to do? For people who don't support Medicaid cuts, I think there's a question about, well, what are you doing to make sure they don't happen, right? How are you making sure that stories like mine, that you're using stories like mine when you talk to the colleagues, when you talk to the press, when you are trying to get attention on this issue? How are you using what I'm saying to you? And I think there's a role for you also to ask, how can you help them do that, right? Oftentimes lawmakers have the ability to do press events or certain events in a community, things that they might want to get other people there. Your voices are important, and they can have a role in amplifying those voices to many more people. For lawmakers who seem that they support Medicaid cuts or are kind of neutral, again, this is an opportunity to re-engage with them and kind of provide more information to talk about the impact cuts would make. So Congress is coming home, not next week, but the week after. They have a scheduled in-district work week, February 17th, and that is a great opportunity to engage with your member of Congress in district. In fact, you don't have to wait or be invited or ask permission. You can stop by the in-district office, and maybe you might want to stop by with a group of folks who are all concerned about this issue. That happens all the time. These in-district offices are about constituent services. And they are public offices. They are offices that are intended to be there so that constituents can visit staff and express their concerns. So you don't necessarily need an appointment if you're going by. It could be great for the staff to kind of understand that there are people willing to come to the office and be unannounced and to talk about a topic that's really important to them. It's a good opportunity for relationship building too. You can take a picture at the in-district office and post and tag your lawmaker or other people and talk about your visit. It's a great way to kind of show that people are showing up at lawmakers' offices to talk about Medicaid. So the week of February 17th, there may be more events that a lawmaker is attending. If you haven't signed up for their newsletters, do so. A lot of times they will publish listening sessions or other things that they are going to be at or do. And maybe people who will be at those events, or you're going anyway. So you can use those as opportunities to engage with legislators. We are now also at the point where you can leverage work that you've already done in a different direction. So you're not necessarily doing anything new, but you are sending the same work to a different set of people. I think it's important for the state legislature at this point to also hear your Medicaid stories. Sometimes the state legislature will like to kind of duck and cover and say, well, we don't have any control of Congress. Congress controls what Congress is doing. And, we don't engage with members of Congress on decisions they're making. In this case, that is not a particularly wise strategy, because the ideas Congress are considering would really hand a huge funding hole for states that they couldn't make up and hand all of the bad decisions about what to cut to state lawmakers to do. There was an estimate that all the menu of cuts to Medicaid would remove about 33%, a third of what we currently spend on Medicaid. That is such an enormous amount of money. There is no way that states could figure out a way to, somehow make that not matter. And these aren't the only cuts that the federal government is potentially doing. Some of you may have seen that cuts to the Department of Education, which has a lot of special education money that comes to the state, or housing vouchers, or SNAP benefits. These are all things that could be part of these bills that might be coming forward. But Medicaid is a huge part of the state budget. It's 26% of our state budget. So even small cuts make a big dent in our state budget. And these are not small cuts, they're big cuts. So I think it's very helpful for state legislators to understand how Medicaid impacts their local districts and communities. Who relies on Medicaid for health and long-term care, as well as who relies on timely payments for Medicaid, from Medicaid, to cover the services, health and long-term care services and workers' salaries that provide those services. So you can leverage your Medicaid story now to your state and your state senator and state representative, and maybe ask them the questions. How are you communicating with the congressional rep who represents the area you represent? They can do things too. So part of what we will do every week is try and gather some news articles and other things, other new information that you can share and amplify and help. Something new to say is always important when you have to keep people engaged. So there have been a number of articles. Some of these are from January. We're in February now, talking about, what are these cuts that are being proposed. Yes, it's all public. We have actually more than just this article talking about what are the various proposals. We have had some reports come out about the importance that Medicaid plays in Wisconsin's rural communities, especially with access to healthcare and especially with covering children. So those are things that are out there that can be shared. We have had some coverage of listening sessions, and Medicaid was part of what that article talked about. And we're starting to get more national media attention on specifically what would cuts to Medicaid mean for people with disabilities. So we're going to kind of try and keep up with, what are the articles from local and trusted sources that might be something you could post on social media, or that you could share with lawmakers, or share with others in your life. We've also done some work, and you will get a link to this in the afternotes, to kind of put all of the information in one place for folks about how Medicaid in Wisconsin works, who's covered by it, and who's paid for it. Who's paid by Medicaid. So there's a presentation, and we'll have a link to it. This is one of the slides that we added to that presentation that gives folks a quick picture of who are the people who get paid with Medicaid dollars. And if they aren't paid with Medicaid dollars, some of these people will not have jobs, because most of what they do is for folks who are in Medicaid. And some of these folks will have a lot less money coming in to support all the services they provide for everyone in the community, whether or not they're in Medicaid. This is also a new piece of, it's not new information, but it is information that we were asked about in previous presentations. We have been talking about family care and IRIS and the Children's Long-Term Care Program as institution diversion programs, because that's what they are. Everybody in family care, IRIS, and CLTS are people who meet nursing home level of care. In other words, if they weren't in family care, IRIS, and CLTS, the state says you have a high enough care level that you would have to live in a nursing home. So we did put together at requests from folks, what's the difference in how much it costs to be in family care or IRIS versus, the more expensive institutional settings. And that's what this table shows on top. I think it's a pretty good reminder of how much it costs to be in, say, a state-run institution versus in the community. It's a really good visual of, where do you want to put your money? In the home and community-based services like family care and IRIS, or in the most expensive thing you can do that people don't necessarily want to be in. Okay. I think in the last part of today's presentation is, we've seen a lot of community building online in local communities, as people are gathering together, you know, at their workplaces and at county boards and other things, there's really a need for folks to make sure that you're reaching out to everyone in your life to let them know that this is happening, because a lot of times people don't know that this is happening. And a lot of you are very well connected to your communities. So it's good to map out the people that you know. You may know a lot of people from a church or faith-based organization. Maybe you know somebody who serves on the county board. Maybe you know somebody who, you know, through a hobby that happens to have a role you didn't know about. That's all really important because it can help grow the base of people who are thinking about Medicaid cuts and what it would mean if they happen to the community. In fact, this is probably a next week update, but we know of several folks who we have a draft, a model county resolution, because one of our people said, you know what? I work with the county board and the county gets a lot of Medicaid dollars. And this would be really impactful if those dollars went away. And so they wanted a county board resolution, and local people went to their county board and advocated for it. And I think we're going to see some counties start passing resolutions. That's a great locally driven strategy that educates a whole nother group of elected officials about what Medicaid cuts might mean. And it gives you something, again, to share, for them to share with their lawmakers and with Congress. We are looking to build and grow the group of people who are concerned about Medicaid. For some of you, you may have seen this slide before, but I think it's really important for the people who you work with and know who are funded by Medicaid to understand that these cuts might happen, but they don't need to happen if enough people say no, right? Or if the right people say no, right? Lawmakers can vote against these cuts. So make sure that the people you interact with in your daily life know what is being proposed and know that they can do something about it to avoid it happening. Have they called their federal lawmakers? Have they said, hey, these are the clients I serve and what would happen if I wasn't able to do the work? Have they said, this is my job and it's funded by Medicaid? If Medicaid is cut, what happens to my job? These are all important ways that we expand the number of voices talking about Medicaid. This slide tells you some specific action steps that you can do to help that. We have heard reports of people with disabilities getting a message from their care managers that, oh, these cuts are coming and this is what it will mean. These cuts haven't happened yet. And it's important that everybody be engaged and moving in the same direction to explain what this impact would mean. So if you are a professional, how are you engaging with your professional organization? Have you called your lawmakers yet? Does your company have a position against Medicaid cuts? Do you have a national organization? What are they doing on these issues? These are important ways that you turn attention to this critical program and make sure everybody is questioning the value of these cuts, even if it's coming from different perspectives. Nobody's a passive victim here. Lots of you are doing actions all the time, and lawmakers have choices that they can make, and they can choose not to cut Medicaid. And I think that's the choice you're asking them to make. So for businesses and providers, you can also map your impact and tell the same story a different way. This is from one of our provider friends who has kind of thought it through, like, what do I do? What is my business? And quantified it. And I think a really powerful way. She's talked about how many individuals that they help. And it's an employment service provider. So she can easily see how many hours the people they're helping are working in the community, in community businesses, and how many employers those workers touch, and how many hours per year are being supported in the community because of this investment in 246 people. That's a great story to talk about the value of what the return on investment that Medicaid makes to a larger community. I think the other piece businesses are in a great position to talk about is, you know, how many workers, how many jobs do they support that are funded with Medicaid dollars? How much of those Medicaid dollars are directly paying salaries? Those are important things that every business can think about, and it probably isn't real hard to know, you know, how many people you employ and kind of know how much of your budget relies on Medicaid. But when everybody does that, it really begins to build a picture of how important those dollars are, not just to people who rely on Medicaid for health and long-term care services, but to the entire local economy that benefits when people are healthy and not in institutions, and can get the help that they need to stay in their homes. Last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll turn it over for questions. We have been asked, and yes, there are some volunteers. We will be introducing volunteers by congressional district next week. There are some volunteers who are willing to try and coordinate people and constituents within the congressional district, you know, to do things, whether it's attending an in-district meeting or doing a press event or you know, lots of other activities that may amplify and help more people know about Medicaid. So we have I think a volunteer in almost every district, but there are a couple we would like to have a team of people, so it is that folks aren't alone. If you are interested in doing that, just email myself or Beth Swadine, and we will get you connected. And if you're interested in being part of that team, let us know and we can connect you with the right people. So we're really happy. We're going to be really thrilled to introduce those folks next week. And for that, I'm going to stop talking now. You will get these slides, and I just want you to know that in these slides, there's going to be some content that's always going to be here. We are always going to have, as part of these slides, the basic resources that so you always know where their links are about Medicaid. Here's a link to that presentation that I was talking about where, you know, who's in Medicaid, how's it work, who gets paid by it, the story sheet, you know, very much Wisconsin-based resources. And then we're always going to have a few slides that are talking about what are the cut ideas. And what do they mean? So you have one, you know, set of bullet points on, okay, what is a block grant? What would it mean? You're always going to have that as part of this presentation. We won't go through it every time, but we are going to include it in the slides every time, just so you never have to search for it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And if Sally, are there any Q&A questions?
Yes, I think there is a